For an hour, I was frozen in place watching this amazing ballet of firefighters and equipment perform. The longer I stood there, the sicker and sicker I got in my gut. It was a terrible feeling. I had never experienced anything like before. I never wanted to feel that way again. I promised myself I would never not know what to do again. There was more to being a firefighter than softball and beer. I started to learn everything I could. I read books, took classes, and asked questions. Within 6 months, I was a driver. Within a year, I was the training officer. Chief Massey Shaw of the London Fire Brigade said, "Men who are pitchforked into learning the business of a fireman only by tending fires must of necessity learn it imperfectly." He said that in 1873. 2 years later, I joined the District of Columbia Fire Department. Wayne and I became friends. I was like a sponge. I could not get enough information about the business of a firefighter. I graduated #1 from my recruit class and attended my first FDIC in 1972. I was full of myself. DC firefighter, Kentland firefighter. I was practicing the business a lot. We did a great job. I bought my first house in Laurel, Maryland, and joined the fire department. In February 1973, Laurel had 7 fire fatalities in 1 month in 3 fires. All the victims, children and adults, were dead before the fire truck left the station. I had that same familiar sick feeling in the pit of my stomach. All my knowledge, all my skill, all my macho, all the men, the equipment in the firehouse could not save those people. They were dead before the fire trucks left the firehouse. There had to be a better way. In the early 70s, there was a new device in the market, the smoke detector. Only one brand, Stratotol. They cost $60. The batteries were $3 a piece. But they detected smoke early in a fire and gave people time to get out from their homes. They could save lives. The Laurel Volunteer Fire Department went on a massive public education campaign to get people to buy and install smoke detectors. The program was so successful, the National Fire Prevention and Control Administration picked it up as a model for its national smoke detector campaign. The DC Fire Department learned that I had helped my local volunteer company with a smoke detector program, so the city assigned me to the chief's office to help the District of Columbia develop their smoke detector program. The District of Columbia was the first metro city to have a retroactive smoke detector law and citywide campaign. In 1978, I was detailed to the National Fire Academy to do smoke detector training for the fire service across the country. We have accomplished a lot with smoke detectors over the last 20 years. In January 2001, a house fire in Oak Orchard, Delaware, killed 11 family members. 3 generations gone. There were smoke detectors, but the batteries had been removed. Last summer, I visited my daughter in Utah. The 3 grandkids were home. Gunnar, the 5-year-old, immediately took me to his bedroom to show me how the stars and clouds his mom had painted on the ceiling glowed in the dark. Great stuff. I noticed the smoke detector plate on the ceiling, but no smoke detector. The smoke detectors in the bedrooms were also missing. I found the smoke detector in the living room, but the light wasn't on. I reached up and pulled it down. It was not connected to the AC power, and there were no batteries in it. I've not done a very good job convincing my daughter about the importance of having working smoke detectors. She's an electrician, so I got her to hook up the smoke detector. When your family, your friends, your neighbors go to sleep tonight, will working smoke detectors be on guard? Do you see the light? Are you the light? It's 1976. I'm in the kitchen at Engine 14 in the District of Columbia Fire Department. I'm arguing on the importance of firefighters going to college. You don't need a college degree to ride the back step, is the opinion of my colleagues. I counter with, the more educated we get, the few firefighters we'll kill. My lieutenant responded, "Firefighters have to get killed as part of the job." I was livid. I was so angry, but you can't break bad on your lieutenant. I had to vent my anger. I was taking a writing class in college, so I went into the office and typed an essay on the topic. My professor thought it was pretty good and encouraged me to see if I could get it published. This is it. I don't want my ears burned. Let me read some excerpts. Do fire service personnel believe that being injured or killed is part of the job? What is the fire service's acceptable casualty level? The fire service will stop being the most hazardous occupation only when we, its members, want it to be. Every time an accident occurs, we must determine who or what is the cause. The NIOSH reports do just that. It's not surprising. Our morbidity and mortality is our own responsibility. In every line-of-duty death report, the victim and others were not following SOPs and training doctrine. In most cases, the officer knew about it and did nothing to fix the error before it led to an accident that resulted in a tragedy. Firefighting is dangerous. We must perform at the 200% proficiency level. By that I mean we must do every task 100% right 100% of the time. Because you do not know what little error, what little mistake, what little omission will be the weak link that breaks the chain. Raise your hand if you wear your seatbelt all the time, going to and returning from calls. One national survey said only 57% of us do. 57% cannot be a passing score for anything we do. We can change. In January this year, Captain Bob Van Dyke of Atlantic City Fire Department Ladder 1 took the seatbelt pledge after his battalion chief asked him to. It was a fire department rule, and it was the right thing to do. He put this job aid on the cab of the truck to remind him to put his seatbelt on and to tell his crew to put their seatbelt on. See the light, be the light. It's 1980. I go to work for the National Fire Academy full-time. I'm in charge of the public fire safety education curriculum. I get pretty full of myself again. People from around the country are calling me for advice. I think I even got a call from NFPA one time. Then one day a friend and faculty member of mine calls me, Joan Skirmerhorn. She's a fire safety educator in Vermont. She had taught a class of elementary kids fire safety stuff, including what to do when your smoke detector goes off at night. Crawl to the door, feel the door. If it's hot, don't open it. Joan had this smart kid in class who asked, "What do you mean by hot?" Joan realized she did not have the answer to that question, but she knew this government expert. She called and asked me, "What's hot?" I did not have the answer, and no one could tell me. I had participated in the California burn test for residential smoke detectors and sprinklers, and a friend of mine, Jim Feld, was a fire protection engineering student at Maryland. So we set up a full-scale burn test to see if by feeling a door with your hand, if you could tell the temperature on the other side of the door. Guess what? You can't. We had lethal temperatures at the 5-foot level outside the bedroom door, and the surface temperature of the door inside never went above hand temperature. Now for your fire safety education lesson. I want everybody to hold hands with a person on either side of them. Come on, you can do this. You got to do it. Behind you. Everybody's got to hold somebody's hand. Now, I know it feels good, but wait a minute. I got to tell you one person feels warmer than the other. To the person who feels warm, you say, "If you were a door, I would not open you. I would use a second exit." You can let go now. How many things do we teach because we've always done it that way? or because the big city does that way, or because the NFPA standard tells us to do it that way. Is the way based on science and research? Most of what we think we know is based on experience and consensus. As a life and death discipline, we must do better. Where does our science and research come from? Who studies us? This is the first doctoral dissertation I ever read. Homer P. Hopkins conducted the study in the mid-60s. I didn't find it until the 80s. There are about 10 dissertations done on the fire service annually. There are about 100 related to the police service or criminology each year. There are 19 universities with doctorates in criminal justice and criminology. There are no doctoral programs in the fire service. Would you believe there are 5 PhD programs in folklore? Does anyone else see this as a problem? We will never be a true profession until the academic community sees us as a discrete discipline based on science and research. Chief Massey Shaw said the fire service needs to be studied and practiced like other science-based professions. Chief Shaw would ask us, what has taken us so long to see the light? Next week, the Congressional Fire Service Caucus Institute will hold its annual banquet in Washington, D.C. This is a big deal event. It's held in the largest banquet room in the nation's capital. 2,000 fire service and political VIPs attend this event. Every year at this $200 a plate dinner, they give an award to somebody who's done something outstanding and notable for the fire service. One year, they gave it to a volunteer firefighter that got a pumper sent to Bosnia during the Civil War. They also gave it to a leader in Kuwait after the first Gulf War for his work putting out oil fires and preventing an environmental disaster. One year, I get to attend with a free ticket. The award is given to Mr. Corey Snyder. Mr. Snyder is being recognized because he had watched the TV program about thermal imaging cameras, called his local volunteer fire department, and found out that they didn't have one. He and his buddies went door to door, collected money, and bought a thermal imaging camera for the fire department. When Mr. Snyder came to the podium to receive his award, 1,999 people spontaneously rose from their seats to give him and his friends a standing ovation. One person could not rise, me. You see, I was getting that same familiar sick feeling in my gut. Something was wrong with this. Because you see, Corey Snyder was 11 years old, and his friends were 7 and 8. How can we, as a professional discipline, whose vocation has life and death consequences, rely on children to raise money for the equipment we need to do our job? When was the last time the police department relied on donations? For the first time in history, the fire grants have given us access to funding like never before. This is great. But consider this. The police service has been getting $12 billion a year in federal funding even before 9/11. The police service understands that money is critical to efficient and effective operation. For example, if you put a group of police chiefs in one room and a group of fire chiefs in another room and give them both the same problem to solve, the fire chiefs come out with a solution. The police chiefs come out with a grant proposal. We need to learn a new phrase. Show me the money. We need it to do our job to keep you safe. I have one more life-affirming experience to share with you. When I was 12, I attended my first funeral. My great-grandmother, Mattie Hammond. She was 95. To this day, I can still hear her in my head calling me Bertie. None of you get to call me Bertie. Mattie Hammond had 5 children, 6 grandchildren, and 10 great-grandchildren. Mattie was the center of attention when we all got together. When I was 30 years old, I met her again. I was going through some of my grandfather's papers after his death. I came across a poem that Grandma Mattie had written to him on the occasion of his retirement. When I read it, I could hear Mattie's voice in my head, and I saw her in a whole new light. My mother told me that Mattie wrote a lot of poetry, and that Great Aunt Pat had a whole collection of them. On the next visit, I asked if I could read more of Mattie's poetry. I was given a typed manuscript of over 60 poems that covered all types of events in our family. I even found one about me. I would like to share it with you. A feather